Hello, and welcome to the show Writing in the Tiny House. The entire point of this podcast is to help the tormented artist by sharing what I know about writing, publishing, and stress management so that you can have the tools to produce the content that you have been eager to write. If you have the steps in place, you can produce a short story in as few as 3 months or a novel in as few as 18 months. And hopefully through the ideas in this podcast, you will have the wisdom to adjust that timeline if you need to. I am Devin Davis, the guy who lives and writes in a tiny house in northern Utah. Thank you for tuning in, and please enjoy today's episode of Writing in the Tiny House. Hello and good morning. It is another Wednesday, and here we are in the tiny house doing another episode of this awesome show. Guys, it has been rough. Things have been rough, and I will compile another clip episode on my experience with beta readers later, just because that whole process isn't finished yet. I have a few beta readers who have not given feedback. I'm going to be meeting one of them tonight for drinks. I'm excited to hear what she has to say, but there has been a reality check in my life, and I have decided to share that reality check with you all today. At the same time, I don't want this to sound bitter or whatever, just because sometimes when we have moments like this, it's really easy to just get mad, and it's okay to get mad. It is also a very healthy way to realize your life and to realize what you're doing, to realize the next steps, to realize your reality, hence the reality check. Here's the fundamental question with all of this that I don't know that I've addressed in a previous episode of Writing in the Tiny House. What does it take to be a writer? What does it take for a person to say that they are a writer? And like with so many art-based things, I mean, in reality, you don't have to have painted anything in order to say that you're a painter. You certainly don't have to have sold any of your paintings to say that you're a painter. And you don't have to have any of your artwork in your house. It is something where you can say it and it is true. I mean, with painting, perhaps you need to have held a brush at some time in your life. And that could have been at any time. And at that moment in time, you were a painter, and you could still claim to be a painter because of opinions, because of, time isn't real anyway, stuff like that. Writing is the same way. If you have written an essay ever in your life, you are a writer. And today, you could still claim to be a writer if you have not written a single word since that essay in junior high school. At the same time, though, if you do claim to be a writer, people will want to see the fruits of your labor. They will want to see what you have done. And so if you say that you are a writer, especially if it is your profession instead of your hobby, and that's another tricky part with this, friends. If you want it to be your profession, there's a lot of stuff that you're going to have to do. And the fact of the matter is, most writers in this world do not support themselves through their writing. If you want to support yourself through your writing, there is a lot you are going to have to do, and it will take a long time. I mean, there are always exceptions to all of the things that I'm going to be saying, but by and large, most writers don't support themselves with writing. And those who do, it has taken a long time to get there. Or a lot of the writers that we see today are able to write full-time because a loved one is actually supporting them or whatever. They write full-time because they don't need to worry about income. Income is being provided somewhere else, either through a loved one or inheritance or whatever. And like I said, there's always exceptions to that. But here we are. Here I am. I finished another pass with Tiz, and we're doing the beta readers, and I received feedback that Tiz needs to be longer. Tiz needs to be a full-on novel instead of just a novella. The beta reader who said that had all of the reasons to back it up. Had all of it. For this reason and that reason and whatever. The thing is, I originally wrote Tis thinking that it would just be a short story. And so I worked it out in the method that we see short stories. There aren't many characters. There aren't many characters who speak. Everything feels pretty condensed, and that's how I wanted it. But was it the best way to do it? This beta reader has shown me that probably it wasn't. So while there were definitely strong parts in Tis, and I appreciate that, and I love knowing that those things were there, thus far I've gotten a lot of good feedback from Tis. Another trick, another kind of interesting thing with beta readers is if somebody says that they don't like the main character and another person says that they do like the main character, the thing is, both of those beta readers are right. I mean, there's always a chance that the first person missed something, or there's a chance that I didn't do it right, or there's probably a greater chance of a little bit of both of those possibilities. But I've received very good feedback from Tis thus far. But one beta reader wanted to understand the scope of it all. The thing is, Tis is supposed to be the first book of a world of books. I hesitate to say that it's it would be a series, but the thing is, each of the books is not necessarily a continuation of the previous book. Most of these books will have different characters with different plots and different things, but they all take place in the same world. And so this collection of books, this Tales from Vlador stuff that we've been doing for the past while, is actually a world of books. It is a world of lives. It's a world of people, and not necessarily all of the books are continuations of a previous plot. And that's where we are. So we have stories that take place in this city. We have stories that take place in another city. And the stories are unrelated except for a single element that ties in later. And of course, all of this builds for the final thing at the end. Just because that's how it gets to be, right? You build for 10 books and then you have the final trilogy at the end with a big battle. It's something that we've seen a lot in fantasy. Going back to this idea of being a writer and what it all kind of looks like, this beta reader wanted to understand the scope of where we were headed with this, of where Tis was going, of the future projects that are on the horizon, so to speak. And she said that the story is too big and the world is too complicated, and the intricacies of the magic system are such that it cannot all be properly developed in a novella. And the thing with releasing a collection of short stories and a collection of novellas over time is the entire world is not fully developed in each novella. And unless the novellas are all released at the same time, the reader is only going to get a half-baked world in each novella over the next many years until I'm finished with them. And so I can either release a collection of novellas all at once, or I can kind of flex my muscles and do all of the world building and make Tis a big beefy novel, which will then set off this entire collection of this entire world of books with a splash. There's a lot of heat riding on the first book of any collection of stories in any series. The first book is super important, and I am convinced right now that a novella is not the best way to do a first book. It was a year ago that I was seeing a trend of people releasing a novella as a way to test a theory or to test the market to see if releasing something larger or something, along those lines of the novella later would land well. And so the novella was a way to test the market. And the thing is, now that we are 18 months beyond that, beyond me hearing about that first trend, I have not seen the fruit of any of the people following those trends yet. I know of one person who released a novella. His name is Daniel Green, and it was his first anything that he ever wrote. He has a very large following on YouTube, a very respectable, big following, and so he self-published because he already has a big audience that he directly addresses, I think, 2 times a week on his channel on YouTube. And he released a novella, and I don't know what has come of that. I don't know if he has continued with that or not, or if it was just a good project that he did and now it's done. Who knows? I mean, I could figure it out, and I probably shouldn't include that on a podcast episode, but here we are just standing here thinking. So, considering the length of time that comes in between these projects, is a novella the best way to go? Like I said, I'm convinced that it's not. That also means that Tiz gets to be largely rewritten. And so, to be a writer, here's the thing, friends. Here is the hard thing. To be a writer, you write. To be a writer does not mean that other people will have to read what you have written. You do not need to land yourself a big following in order to be considered a writer. I have thus far written literally hundreds of thousands of words. Literally hundreds of thousands of words that all belong within this world of Vlador. And this dates back to my first novels that I released when I was 24. I mean, this was forever ago. And I mean, it's what happens when you're 24 and you're eager to have a book out in the world, and so you release a book that has not had a final proofread. So those books are not available now, but they take place in Vlador. And so here we are. I have written hundreds of thousands of words. I am going to write hundreds of thousands of more words until a readership gets a hold of any of it. And so the question of the day is, and I ask this very seriously because I already know my own answer, but I'm going to pose it to you, the listeners of Writing in the Tiny House. I'm assuming that most of you are writers or hoping to be, whether professionally or as a hobby or whatever writing fulfills in your life. If you end up writing hundreds of thousands of words, and a handful of people only ever get to read some of it, is it all worth it? So go ahead and think about that, because hundreds of thousands of words represents hours and hours, hundreds of hours, if not more. And as a writer, is it worth it? If only a handful of people ever read a fraction of the stuff you have written. So for me, the answer is yes. That's something that I've been toiling with for a long time, and I have this big-ass series that I have been struggling with for a long time to begin, to start. And now, because life is different than it was 10 years ago, I can start it. But this is something that will likely carry me into my 60s. There's enough books and enough there's enough content to carry me into my 60s. We get to just wonder if something that takes up so much of my life doesn't get read by somebody else or only a handful of other people, and whatever else, is it going to be worth it? Something to think about. So thank you for joining me today, and I leave you with that sobering thought. And that is it for today. Before we go, I need to say that my current work in progress, Tiz, the next installment of Tales from Vlador, is ready for beta readers, people to read the novella and share with me their experience. It's a big, important step before publishing. So if you wish to be a part of this project, reach out to me on my social media handles. On Instagram, I'm at author Devin Davis, and on Twitter, I'm at author Devin D. And remember that my short story Brigitte is available on Amazon as an ebook and on Audible as an audiobook. Check those out today. Run by copy editor Chrissy Barton, Little Syllables Editing is a reliable resource for anyone looking to improve their manuscript. Chrissy does line edits, copy edits, and the final proofread for experienced writers and newbies alike. Go to littlesyllables.com and reach out to Chrissy today. A link is in the show notes.